Okay, we're recording right as of right now. Okay?
That's cool. So there's a lot, there's a lot of areas that I know that I don't know whether you know. I know a lot about music.
I know you do.
I know a lot about nature.
For some reason, Michael, the thing about you that intrigued me is that on some level, I always suspected that there was a depth to you that is not always maybe revealed, but that could be because of the fact that outside of your books and a few things I know about you, I don't know you personally, but in a sense, I do know you from the way you write.
Well, yeah.
And the fact that it's not what I have seen or experienced through most astrologers.
Well, I'm not most astrologers.
And I suspect it has to do with that very close conjunction to Neptune to your midheaven in your natal horoscope.
Well, whatever. I mean, I think there's lots of ways to look at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
My Neptune is conjunct the midheaven, conjunct the northern node of the moon, pretty exactly.
Exactly.
And heliocentrically, it's conjunct Venus.
Correct.
And part of a six-party trine, grand trine, with 6 planets, which is really unusual.
It's not only that, but I found it unusual, and I was going to ask you something about that. It had to have been challenging growing up, really establishing your identity, because you had that 10th house Neptune, which had to have been a connectedness to higher states of consciousness that maybe you were or were not at the time aware of what was going on. I'm sure the music helped that out in the 60s, but you have that earthy Taurus stuff in the 6th house, which of course helped you as a businessman.
Well, sir, I'm an archivist. It helped me. I want to take care of and preserve stuff.
Okay.
That's what the 6th house tells you.
Okay.
To take care of, I'm an archivist. That's what I mostly was.
Yeah. Well, see, it makes sense to me. What you're saying makes sense when I consider the work you've done along the way, how you write.
Yeah.
As there is a transcendent quality to your writing, particularly astrologically, which really excites me because of the fact that there's that depth there that sometimes a lot of the material that's out there doesn't get beyond just a mental observation and analytical perspective on astrology. It doesn't transcend into the consciousness of astrology.
Well, there's no roots to it, to a lot of it. I mean, it's all intellectual. I'm very rooted. I have a lot of earth, a lot of Taurus, and stuff like that. So also, I'm just passing through, right? I'm an astrologer that's passing through, but I'm a master astrologer that people just don't know it. That I know a lot about astrology, but most of my astrology isn't generally known. I mean, even the stuff I've done, I can't say that in all the years I've done astrology, which is about 60, that I even have one student that can talk to me and ask questions that are reasonable, that show me they understand the stuff, right?
I'll tell you what surprised me, and I never would have thought this through most of the 30-some years that I've been involved in astrology. I never would have thought that I would have reached a point where I recognized there was a point of transcendence beyond what is commonly identified with astrology.
What's that mean? You got to paraphrase that a bit. I'm not sure I understand that.
Okay. It's like when I do astrology readings, or if I do live streams, like we just got off a live stream that we did for about an hour, there is a sense of being connected to a higher source energy within inside of myself. The work that I do in regards to clients, that same guidance is there with me. And there is that sense that when I'm going through the charts with people and stuff, that I'm looking for a way to connect with them so that the energy can be raised to a different level of their understanding or of their experience of what they're going through.
Exactly. I understand that. I mean, there's a certain point usually reached where you can, it can cause people to have to choke up or swallow, or there's actually little physical signs when you make this change. There's a little change that comes when you're at another level. They're all physical. I mean, you can, I'm aware of it. And of course, I'm aware of it when I'm doing a reading, just because you can just feel it. It's just like changing gears, right? You're going, right. Yeah, so I'm with you on that.
And it's like you can't do it for everybody, but it seems like that the more that you are committed to that inner relationship, the more people that are sent to you that are ready for that level of astrological reading or service or connection.
Maybe something like that. Maybe, I don't know that. I mean, yeah, definitely through your reputation and what you do, it's a filter, and the ones that are more interested in what you are get to you, right? But I'm not sure how magical that is, but I just don't know how that works. So,
do you believe in magic, Michael?
My father was a well-known magician of the other kind. So I grew up hating that, because I was dragged around to meet all the famous magicians and endlessly. But do I believe in magic? I don't know what you really mean by magic. I mean, certainly. I'll
give you
yeah,
some territory. Okay.
Okay, good.
Do you feel that the world as it is and the way we are is in direct relationship to our disempowerment from our higher nature? In other words, we have created the world as it is because of who we are, because we, for whatever reason, chose not to be whole.
I don't know. Let's talk about that. This is an interesting point. Buddhism is not Platonism. Now, let's talk about, or it's not Christianity, which means that both Plato and Christians believe that we believe in original sin. That once we're whole or pure, but we fell away from it and we need to come back. That's not what Buddhists believe. Buddhists don't believe that at all. They believe we, in all the time there is, and perhaps all the lifetimes each of us have had, supposedly, we never knew. We never knew. It's not like we knew and forgot. We're trying to get back. We never got there. And this was very clear because I asked my teacher, who was a very high Lama, but I worked with for 36 years, this a number of times in a number of ways, because it meant a lot to me to try to know, am I trying to get back to what I was, or did I have never gotten there? And he was very, very clear. You never got there. He called us, we're the stragglers, the ones who in all the time there is never got it, been unable to get it. Not that we got it and lost it and somebody's got to help us. So that's a huge difference. I don't know if you follow me. So which one are you?
Well, you know what's interesting? I feel like that I, at least here recently anyhow, I'm at the verge. I'll put it to you this way. I astral travel almost daily.
What's that mean?
For me, what it means is that I'm able to shut off a good part of my mental and emotional attachment. And I'm able to feel on a much deeper level of my inner being. My third eye gets activated. I'm able to see and interact, what I would call interdimensionally, with different levels of consciousness. And it continues, it keeps growing. It keeps getting stronger. It's Michael, it's like I've learned the process of separating the identity through the ego, the mind, and the emotions, and have begun to develop a relationship with a higher, finer feeling nature within inside of myself.
Okay.
And that energy is what is working through me in the videos that I do, and also in the individuals that I do readings for. And going back to what you said there about, where are you on the path? I identify that as that we are being called to, what I use the term, we are being called to wholeness and a recognition of the totality of who and what we are. And that's the path we have been on. Okay. But it seems like that right now, with the things that are happening in the world and the urgency of what's involved, that things have speeded up. Pluto and going into the latter part of Capricorn and stuff, things are accelerating, with Neptune, the madness and everything, the dissolving of the old structures and stuff. It's like there's a combination there of the Pluto or the Neptunian energy wanting to rise us higher in our awareness while the physical structure starts to shake and crumble. But where is it going?
So it's an exponential curve is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I was having a talk, oftentimes I've done videos with John Townley, and John and I have talked back and forth about this.
And he and I are good friends.
Mm-hmm. And I found we were talking about astrology and the fixation on just what I call the mechanical mental, analysis of it, And I said to John, I said, if that's all we're doing with astrology, what good is it? Where is it leading us? What is it trying to show us? Really?
And what do you find? What do you see?
Exactly. It's like, what is, it's almost like, that's like I said, that's why I was excited to be able to talk to you, because in your writings, I said, this man has vision.
This man,
yeah, right. He may astral travel. He may be aware on a deeper level than what many of the astrologers that I've read their books over the years and stuff, He definitely is not the standard astrologer that is put out there as, this is right. An astrologer,
you don't get an award for that. That's pretty clear, right? So yeah, I'm not a standard astrologer.
Yeah, but here's my hope. My hope is that for the folks that see this interview with you, not just learn about you, but they also are able to taste some of the energy that comes about as a result of our sharing back and forth, our particular experiences and insights.
That would be good. I'm for that, right?
Yeah, to feed them, something to nourish and feed us, because it's so rare sometimes to be able to talk astrologically to what would be considered to be beyond just the basic foundational structure, and talk about these.
Yeah, but astrologers, in my opinion, I don't know how to put it. I could say they're in deep shit. They've been wandering for about 500 years and haven't come out of it yet. And I've met thousands of astrologers, and as customers, I've had 30 or 40,000 customers over the years. Not that I knew all of them, but many of the great astrologers of my generation, have been to my home, and we've been able to talk like we're talking. People like Rudger and Gokalan and Charles Harvey, and I could just go on down, Robert Hand and John Townley, of course. John and I are close friends. Anyway, so I know quite a bit about what is going on or was going on. I don't know what's going on in astrology. I haven't found I haven't found anything. I see all of the folks looking into the different ancient astrology, into Greek and Latin and Arabic and all that stuff. I have no quarrel with that. I'm just not interested in that, just because that's a lot of work. And I'm basically a lazy astrologer. I want the thing to work for me, not me work for it, if that makes any sense. I want this thing to work. And the techniques that I've come up with mostly came out of my own mind. I've mixed my astrology with my Tibetan Dharma pretty thoroughly. And I've learned to go, and I had probably the largest astrology library in the world, which I donated to a University of Illinois some years ago. So I've had a chance to look at everything almost that's been ever written. It's just, there's very little clarity in all of that. It's really sad. And also astrologers can't seem to make a decent living, right? They don't have enough money.
Yeah.
So they begrudge each other. It's like a bunch of people in the middle of the deep water trying to climb on each other to try to get out of the water. And this sounds pretty negative. It's not negative.
No,
it's accurate.
It's accurate.
There's no, ever since Copernicus, astronomers got it, right? They walked away with two charts that they both use. We astrologers walked away with the one that we started with, which is the geo one, geocentric positions, and we've never shown any interest. So it's like saying we think everything revolves around us, because that's what Copernicus pointed out. He says, no, guys, everything doesn't revolve around us because we revolve around the sun. But no, we shook that off somehow. Somehow we were able to get along without that information. And I think that the empowerment that astronomers got, we've never taken as a group.
I don't think that people take, not just astrologers, I don't think that people understand the depth of know thyself and how absolutely critical it is to not only their inner healing, but to the revelation of the great truths of life.
Okay, I'm listening to that. I mean, know thyself, you're touching touchy stuff just because the Buddhists don't really recognize the self as what's called like a soul.
Right.
That's going to live. The self, what we call the self in Buddhist terminology, doesn't last beyond our grave and our death. We don't take it with us. We don't appear, Michael Erlewine is not going to appear in a rebirth, but I am going to have a rebirth apparently, but it will be certain traces and certain things within myself I've set in motion through my own desires and graspingness that are going to draw around themselves in another birth, a new personality. And it's going to go by a different name because all of those traces and all of those attachments that we have are going to continue on until they wear themselves out. That idea. So when you're putting the word self in it, then I have to talk about what do you mean by that when you say know thyself. Let me. The Buddhists say know thyself means know that there's no, that the self is something, it's a construct, according to Buddhists, that we create as kind of an assistant, somebody to help us out. But we've kind of, it's like ventriloquist and a dummy, but we've kind of let the dummy direct us. That's kind of a Buddhist point of view.
It's always the problem, Michael, that to convey truth, words never quite measure up to the actual experience.
Well, that's by definition.
Right. Now,
because words have to make sense. Otherwise, it's nonsense. And if they don't make sense, then another way to say this is that words, all language, are simply pointers toward sensual experience, toward actually going, go forth and live it. Don't talk about it. It's that kind of stuff. I mean, that's kind of a Buddhist perspective of the conceptual mind, right? Which is most astrologers are very conceptual.
Right.
I mean, the truth is most of them want to tell me about either one of two charts, either Hitler's chart, which I have no interest in, or the chart of the United States of America, which I have seen so many times and stuff that there's got to be something else we could talk about beside Hitler's chart. You know what I'm saying? You got it.
Exactly. And of course, the USA chart's debatable as to the actual accuracy of the whole thing.
everything's debatable, apparently, according to Trumpism and stuff like that. I mean, everything is, look at the state we're in, right?
Here's my view. Here's my view upon what I was saying about the self, based upon my personal experience. Okay,
well, that's what you got, right?
Exactly. All right. What I see, what I experience, is that essentially there are at least, I'll use the terminology, there are two bodies. There's the physical body, then there's the spiritual or the astral body, and of course there's the etheric. There's other levels involved in that. But the physical body, okay, essentially is composed of the mind, the ego, the imagination, the emotional body, the memory, and things of that nature. Because a fraction of our being, of our total nature, is focused in the physical dimension at that vibration through the physical body for the experiences that we are having in this world. And it's partially because of the fact that we have somehow shut down our feeling nature. We are thinking rational beings who have feelings, but they're so far suppressed that we're unable to experience the finer dimensional qualities of the universe, of which we are.
But have we suppressed them, or have we just never delved into them?
Possibly. But it seems like, in terms of the experiences that I've had, because of the things that have been opened or the awakening going on, is that there is this knowledge or this need to awaken our feelings and to realize that we never really have left home. We are just not looking at it. We're not looking far enough into ourselves to realize that we're still connected to the higher levels of the universe, or whatever you want to call it, and that it is an infinite experience, okay, if we're willing to interact in that matrix, if you want to call it that.
But there's a lot of gotchas in there. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think that you, even as you speak, you're bringing layer upon layer of conceptual stuff to it. I'm not sure how far any of us can follow those layers before it just gets opaque.
I think that for me, Michael, I can only base it upon the experience that I have on those journeys, and the sense that I've separated from the mental and emotional body to a degree to where my identity is totally taking on a different texture completely, almost, an instantaneous type thing, to where I know things before I can put words to them, or I sense things, symbolically a lot of times in terms of what I'm saying, and seeing things about my own past unconscious, issues that I have carried through a good part of my life, situations where I have felt and experienced a healing as a result of that. And again, it goes back to this feeling that the purpose of all of this chaos is a reflection of what we identify with what's inside of ourselves, and the greed and the fear are kind of maxing that out. But still, on the inside, okay, below the emotional and mental trauma, there is this opportunity being given, or this hand reaching down and saying that, okay, you're seeing this go on, but there is a way through this. But it's not through politics, and it's not through anybody's promises. It's through the process of reclaiming or re-owning the totality of who we are as a spiritual, physical being.
I mean, again, I would say we're not reclaiming, but we never claimed it. We never got there. Okay. And as far as reaching up, I don't think it's so much of reaching up as I do reaching within.
There you go.
Or reaching down in our own self. Buddhists don't believe in we're not theists, right? We don't believe there's somebody up there. We're going to have to do it ourselves.
Exactly.
So that's
personal responsibility. Personal responsibility is absolutely essential, because there isn't anybody that can sell it to you.
Except yourself. I mean, you have to believe it and become certain on your own.
Right.
Anyway, where are we leading with this? Because I think we could go on talking this way forever and still not get much
All
of
right.
anywhere.
Let's
So.
go back here. Let's go back to This Is Your Life, Michael. Let's call
Okay.
it This Is Your Life. Okay.
All right.
Let's go back to the 60s. As I recall, you were not only a musician, but you also were involved in either organizing, promoting some of the well-known musicians that came out of the 60s, and also were a part of concerts, possibly there in the Michigan area. Would you like to share some of your experiences or what that particular part of your life meant to you?
I could try. Again, I'm not sure which of those things you touched on you want to hear about. I mean,
all right, you
in the late,
go ahead.
Yeah, in the late 1950s, when I was young, I was part of what's called the folk revival, which started in the 40s, really, but really was kind of reaching its heyday in the late 50s and early 60s, before the whole alternative culture of the hippies and stuff, which started about 1965. But there's a period of time between the late 50s and the middle 1960s where a lot happened. And as far as I did, I mean, one thing I did was know and travel and hitchhike with Bob Dylan around the country and hang out. And he wasn't famous, but he was already Bob Dylan. He wasn't Zimmerman. But he was a very bright guy, but no brighter than any of us as far as we know. I mean, he was very ambitious. And I think he must have known. I remember one time when we were in New York City, and we were at trying to remember what the name of the club was. I think it was Gertie's Folk City. And there was a guy who was later, I think, in the I forget in what group, but maybe the Blues Project or something like that. A guy named Danny Kalb, who was a guitar player. And he was having kind of his time of life right then. He was very popular. And I remember sitting on the shadows back in the shadowy part with Dylan. Dylan didn't like that. I mean, he wasn't jealous. He just must have known who he was at some level. Even if he didn't know who he was ambitious enough that, he was aware that he was not being realized, right? He was not being recognized, that kind of thing. So I did a lot of hitchhiking for a number of years, many times to New York City or to the West Coast. Not many times to the West Coast, but a number of times to the West Coast. So there's that part of me. Then, and I was never a very good musician during that part. I was trying to learn to do what's called Travis picking, which is also called three-finger picking. And I traveled with a guy called Perry Letterman, who Dylan and I would agree was probably the greatest Travis style picker we'd ever seen. He didn't sing, which is a good thing, because he wasn't a great singer, but he was an incredible player. And when he would play a tune, it would have an opening and a middle. It was like an opera. It was incredible. And he would know it and I would know it. So I traveled with him for quite a while. So there's that whole part of it. But maybe you want to hear more later when, at some point in folk music, what we were all doing, Dylan wasn't writing his own songs then. If he did, he wasn't singing them. It wasn't about that. What the folk revival was just what the words say. It was like trying to take original folk melodies and trace them back to the most perfect original version of it you could possibly find. And that if somebody liked your work, it was they liked your work about being true to that music that came from England or Scotland or wherever. It was before any of us thought much about, that we could write music, right? That we could be part of that. So that could be a whole story, which I won't bother with here. But I'm saying in that process, they also begin to take to the Newport Folk Festival and the different places like that, various country blues artists. And so being a good revivalist of music, we wanted to go to take these blues players and try to trace them back and try to revive them. And then somewhere along in there, we realized that the blues wasn't gone. It didn't need revival. In fact, it was just quite alive. It was just playing on another side of town, maybe separated by what we would call a racial curtain. We didn't go to the black side, to the black bars and stuff, just because it was uncomfortable. We weren't welcome and we didn't know how to be welcomed. So we began to, but this music didn't need to be revived, didn't need to be saved. It needed to be savored, right? We needed to appreciate it, and we began to appreciate it. And that took up from there, from the time that I realized that, for many, many years, that's all that I studied. I studied Black music and Black musicians, and particularly blues musicians, maybe some jazz, but mostly all blues. And I interviewed, just like you're interviewing me, I interviewed scores and scores of them, not just the musicians, but their families and all this kind of stuff, with audio and eventually video. A lot of it was lost by the University of Michigan, which is the horrible truth. But I got to know these people, and I got to know these people as not just musicians, but as, and then I have to take a quick sidebar. My father never really talked to, he had 5 boys. I was the oldest. He never really talked on a very personal level. I don't know about the rest of the boys. I don't think so. But for me, we never had a conversation about anything important. And that was, and neither did I have a grandfather on either side. So I never had a male figure that I could look up to on an inner sense, talking about stuff. So when I met these great Black musicians like Muddy Waters and Big Boy Crudup and just dozens and dozens of them, it wasn't just the music that interests me. It was that they fulfilled that within me of looking for an older male figure that had life wisdom and that was willing to share it with me. And that was a tremendous thing for me, just for the reason I gave you, if not for their wonderful music. And so I helped to put on two landmark festivals and later ones also. I was on a board of different music organizations that presented the blues. In 1969, it was the first Ann Arbor Blues Festival ever. And there were scores and scores of musicians in one place. Maybe in their lives, they had been at a club together, 2 or 3 of them in passing or playing together, but they'd never been there by the hundreds and families. And so they'd never been together, much less being paid to do that and present themselves to a white audience that was just beginning to understand and to love that music. So I'm saying that was this was just before Woodstock, which I never went to because I was still in the throes of this. That's what I'm talking to you about. It just had happened a couple of weeks earlier. And many of these musicians came to Ann Arbor to perform, but they showed up randomly kind of as much as a week before. They just showed up, and the University of Michigan put them up in quad rooms, little tiny rooms, or in bigger rooms. And we would just go like, go and see Big Mama Thornton, Hound Dog. And we would just spend an evening probably drinking whiskey with them until late at night. Or Big Boy Crudup, who wrote Elvis's first song, That's All Right, Mama. And we would just show up. My brother would just he would just open, the Big Boy Crudup was a huge man, big like Howlin' Wolf. He opened the door and Dan just showed him we had a bottle of Jack Daniels. And he just said, come on in, boys. And we would spend hours talking to these. So I'm trying to give you a flavor that that's how we spent our time. And to me, it was incredible.
A very soul-feeding time, I'm sure.
That's what it was. So that's just one part. Tell me, I think you should ask me questions about the other part of the music and stuff that I'm not thinking you might want to hear about. I mean, I also played with people, like Jerry Garcia and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, any of those things I think would be interesting, and I'm I don't know how you feel about things at the moment, but maybe, if you are interested, we should maybe consider having more conversations about different things, or things of this nature, because I'd love to be able to share this part of your experience and your journey with others on my YouTube channel, and for people in general.
No, I'm happy to do that. I'm retired. I don't do anything but what I want to do, and I'm busy all the time, but nothing interests me more than sharing some of this stuff, because I think not everyone knows about those periods in time.
Right. Well, I think it's like I said, I think what we were talking about when we started the discussion here, there's so much that astrology still needs. It's like a corpse that needs revived, really. And
revived, maybe, but again, there's that same theme of the idea of trying to get back to to a better state. I don't think that's where we're going. I think we're trying to get to a better state. Mm-hmm. But yeah, revive like the music. Yes, of course. Mm-hmm. I get that.
What about Jimi Hendrix? Did you meet Jimi Hendrix?
I never met Jimi Hendrix. I loved his music, and certainly I knew some of the people that were impressed by his music. Jimi Hendrix was a musician of another order of magnitude.
I have to get a dog here.
That's okay. I love dogs.
You can come over here with me, Toby. Say hello to Michael, Tobe.
Listen up, Tobe. We're going to talk. So anyway, Jimi Hendrix came along, and he was like, if you understand what an order of magnitude is, it's way greater than not. And his music was so profound that people like Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton and many, many others just about threw in the towel, just wanted to go home and take their marbles and quit, because there's no way that they could compete with him, nor did they ever compete with him.
The truth of that energy that he channeled was so pure and so real that it immediately humbled them.
Well, they should have. Yeah.
And in some cases, they've said it kind of destroyed some of them.
Yeah, well, there you go. I played on the same stage with Clapton. I opened for him for Cream in the Fillmore Auditorium in 1967 in San Francisco. Watched him shoot up speed in the back room with Ginger Baker and I forget the bass player's name, but
Jack Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. So I was up around that. I played on the same stage with Jerry Garcia, jammed with him, and stuff like that. So I was kind of like a Forrest Gump in a sense. I was on the edge of a whole lot of pretty hot stuff.
Yeah.
But wasn't really in the center of it much. And that's okay. I think I'd be dead if I were. I spent an evening with Janis Joplin, just drinking whiskey and stuff like that. So I got to meet these guys and gals. Now I lost my train of thought. So
okay, I think that I guess maybe this comes with age. Michael, when you look at your life and you think of all the things you imagined you were going to accomplish, and you realize that you didn't. That somewhere in your life you have to come to an acceptance that, and I'll use the term here, karma, fate, and destiny, that you have to come to terms with the fact that whether it's your karma, your fate, or your destiny, this is who you are. This is what you're designed to do. This is the reason why you're here, and that's okay.
But I feel that I've done almost all the things I wanted to do. I mean, just not to argue with you, but
sure,
to contrast with you, that I'm a good finisher. That I don't just start things, I finish them. And I mean, like All Music Guide, even today, it's the largest music database in the world, period. Everything, every record from 10-inch records on up, and I don't own the company anymore, but I started it, nor are they covering it like I did. But I had 150 full-time employees and 500 to 700 freelance writers that worked with our company to cover all this music. And I did the same thing for film. I created one of the 2 largest film databases in the world. And I could go on, and the largest poster database of rock and roll concert posters, not just the kind of stupid posters, but the ones that actually represented a physical concert that you could go to and that, got torn down and taken home. I'm just saying that I didn't just do these, I finished them, right? I mean, it's unfinished forever just because there's new music every day. But I'm saying that I don't have a lot of misgivings of that kind of anything else I wanted to do that I can think of. I'm sure there was some. I think I would have liked to surf, but I didn't live near the ocean.
Yeah.
There's stuff like that I would have liked to do that I didn't get to do. So
well, I think probably early on you had a pretty good idea of who you were or the direction that you were headed. And of course, we know most people don't have even a remote sense of who they are. And
no, I don't know that. But anyway, yeah, I'm thinking about it. I think I had defined myself the way everyone does, right? And it wasn't a gift.
Yeah. It took me a long time, but it's also a process of becoming, I think, acceptance is the word. Is learning
accepting yourself, you mean?
Yes, accepting yourself and the life that you maybe have lived up to a certain point, or accepting why things happened a certain way, how they brought you to where you're at, recognizing, kind of this word fate and destiny, and from a standpoint spiritually that we've been talking about off and on, is aligning yourself more completely with that agreement, purpose for the future.
But there also anomalies like LSD.
Right? There can be. That's another thing.
That's a total. I mean, I'm a bit of an expert on that, and that came along. And I mean, LSD was basically what caused the alternative, the hippie thing. I mean,
yeah,
it changed the world, changed my world forever, right? So sometime we could talk about that, but that's a whole huge thing.
Sure.
And it's very similar to Dharma, what you can do with Dharma, only it's much more difficult to do it with drugs.
Yeah.
Very much more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be an interesting area. Okay.
Yeah.
I can share with you some experiences that I've had.
Sure.
Both bad and good. No, not anywhere close to what you've been through. But
who knows?
But like I said, there's some perspective there and some experiences I've had along the way that have been pretty much out of this world, as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like I said, I'm feeling up to this point, feeling great, enjoying the conversation, enjoying the self-discovery. And I'm sure that there'll be people that will enjoy you revealing your history, your experiences, your perspective and stuff. And I'm looking forward to sharing this. Do you want to move on from this?
Yeah, no, you're the boss. You ask the questions, and I'll try to. If I don't know anything, I'll just say I don't know anything. So
okay. How soon after the 60s did you know or begin Matrix? Was there a time gap there, or was there something that happened? Because I think I'm curious about these stages of your life and whether or not they were precipitated by certain experiences, certain revelations, or understandings.
Okay, with astrology, my younger brother, Stephen, was interested in astrology as I was, and he probably was more interested than I was originally. And I don't know, he may still be, he's still programming astrology even today. So somewhere along in there, let's say that would be the late 60s, my brother Stephen opened a bookstore in Ann Arbor called Circle Books. and I did posters for it. I think I also helped them redesign the whole store and put in fish tanks and globe lights and make it be really kind of mystical and mysterious and wonderful. And also, my wife and I, at some point we were married, we did all the charts for the store. And then I also taught classes at night in the back part of the store. So somewhere I was getting into that, into astrology, not just everything. It was casual to begin with. It was like not just astrology, but numerology and I Ching and the tarot cards. I knew a little bit about all of that because I was just, Gurdjieff. I went and spent 1964. I went and spent that year at Berkeley in California, and that's where I first took acid. And I worked as an assistant manager. I know a lot about classical music, a lot, and I was assistant manager for the Berkeley store called Discount Records, and I was doing a lot of stuff there. When I came back to Ann Arbor from that year in Berkeley was when, well, I think a lot of stuff happened, but I couldn't, let me back up. We were doing all the charts for Circle Books, right? Late 60s. But it was difficult because there were no computers. There was not even, remember, we didn't even have a 4-function calculator that every one of us had until 1972. So there were nothing like that. So we had to use log tables. And before that, if we wanted to do anything like I was trying to do, we had to use trig tables. I had to use trig tables to calculate what I call the local space chart. It took me an entire day to do the mathematics to make a single chart.
I started with a Commodore computer, and I was glad to have that after having an ephemeris and a book of houses or tables, and having to do the mathematics, the trigonometry. I began that way.
Well, I had the first Commodore PET 2001 in 1977. That's when they were available. That's when they first came out. And I had in 1977, I had an entire astrology program that was quite accurate. Helio, geo, local space, running in a total of 8K of RAM.
Yeah.
Which is really unusual. I mean, right now we would spend 8K of RAM to touch a single key on the keyboard, right? So, and before that, I worked with a friend of mine on mainframe computers, calculating astrology stuff. So I was interested in astrology. People think of me, and I've spoken about this before, as kind of like a nerdy guy or a computer guy or a math guy. It just was wrong. And they would say stuff to me like, Michael Erlewine, thank you very much for computerizing astrology, but now that you've done that, please leave the interpreting to us, right? We're the interpreters. You are a mechanic, right? And I was saying, wait a minute. Math was my hardest subject. I never even got out of high school. I never graduated even from high school. And I've had to teach myself almost everything I know. And I didn't get into calculating astrology stuff on a computer because I was a computer whiz. I am an interpreter. I'm a deep plunging astrology into the depths of astrology. That's how I saw myself. I was going where no one had ever gone. In fact, the word matrix was chosen because it's a Greek word, not for the mathematical construct of it, but for, it just means the womb. And matrix was the womb where the future of astrology was going to be born. That was my idea, and it was. So it actually came out of that womb. So what I'm trying to say is that my interest in computers came out of a desire to push the limits of astrology into areas that I wondered about. But before computers, I had no way to experiment because nothing existed. For instance, the first book I ever wrote in 1975, this is before computers, home computers, 1975, was a book called The Sun is Shining, is the title. And it was a 400-year helio ephemeris. It was quite accurate from I think, 1600 and something or something to 2023 or something like that. I forget, 1653 maybe to 2050 or something like that. So that shows you here I was creating a tool that didn't exist so that astrologers could calculate astrologically the heliocentric chart, because I was finding out that that chart wasn't just another chart, it was the mother chart, of which the astrology chart that astrologers use, that geocentric, is just a view of. All the standard traditional geocentric astrology is just a photo, just a picture of the solar system from Earth. So it's a picture. It's like a picture of your mother. Wouldn't you want to know a little bit about your mother if you're taking all these pictures of her? So, but no, even today, they don't. They don't use, and so then eventually I became, oh, you're the heliocentric astrologer. When really, no, I use both of the charts and others. I use the helio, the geo, the local space, azimuth and altitude, right ascension and declination. All those different coordinate systems can express the moment that we were born in slightly different view. And each of those systems is inclined to the other slightly different, so that we have different inclinations. So we're differently inclined, what moves us, what we can measure, what we appreciate. So I'm just trying to give you the picture. The picture is I wandered into doing that kind of stuff as a way of better understanding, and now we can use the word, or I will, understanding myself through astrology. So I always wanted to look at my chart. Well, what does this technique do for me? How do I see myself differently? Anyway,
I think it takes a certain level of awareness for a person to understand, particularly when they're just beginning, all these multitudes of charts and techniques. What do they mean? And it took a while for me to realize that much like photographers, all photographers don't see the same vision when they take a picture, but essentially they're taking a picture of the same thing, but they are able to show it from a different angle and a different view.
Exactly.
Different charts are capable of showing us different aspects of an event or ourselves, right, beyond just beyond a two-dimensional flat view.
It's like a 3D view.
Exactly. And that brings me to your PDF book on deep space.
Okay.
And you even mentioned that when you were, I think, writing the foreword to it, that you hadn't known of many astrologers up until that point that were daring to discuss.
And that was before computers also.
Yeah, that was like
1976.
1976. And this is what kind of really struck me as like, well, Michael either has innate profound awareness and understanding, or he has had some experiences trigger him down through his life that have opened up this knowledge bank, because you write with such clarity and such intellectual purity. It's like you talk about these things. It's like you talk about these things because you know it. You don't have to think about it.
You could ask my wife. She'd tell you I disappeared for a period of time to the University of Michigan's physics library, studying astrophysics and photocopying reams and reams and reams of stuff out of that library because she couldn't take the books out. And I didn't have the regular kind of cards you could do that kind of stuff because I wasn't a student or anything like that. So I had to go and study that to death, so to speak, before I could write that book. That book was simply a book. It was called Astrophysical Directions. It was directions for astrologers to be able to appreciate deep space in the language of astrology rather than the language of astronomy, which is right ascension and declination, that idea. So,
do you see the deep space essentially as being, I'll use the word which I've heard before other astrologers, that that's kind of a transpersonal consciousness is what they're dealing with, that it's not something that man probably is going to be able to, in maybe this lifetime, to recognize as like we recognize Saturn and Jupiter and then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that these things maybe are a element of human consciousness that transcends the experience of humanness to the extent we know it here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, something like that. But again, I'm always pushing down, not pushing up, which means I'm not pushing it to be more intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pushing to be more to get our feet in, hands into the clay, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. There's a big
I think
difference.
I think what you're trying to say, Michael, is essentially what I'm coming from in regards to the experience is that you're probably trying, and this is what you were looking for when you were in the blues. You were looking for that feeling, that soulful feeling of connectedness to something that you long for deep inside of yourself. And that's essentially, in my perspective, for example, is what in the interviews with the astrologers that I know, there is this intellectual fascination with technique and procedure and different types of charts and stuff like that. But I've always felt like there was something missing. There was a soulfulness, there was a soulful understanding or a transcendent conscious identity to astrology or an intelligence behind astrology, and that it was transcendent of all the things we were examining. But getting to that point was.
But again, it's that I don't want to bicker with you. I just want to say that all of the languages you use is always, and you just did it, always pushing up, looking up. I'm saying that's going the wrong direction. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying what you want to do, and here's the way I explain it to myself, is that all language, all the language like what we're doing right now, we're talking, depends on the sense it makes.
Right.
And if it doesn't make sense, we call it what? Nonsense.
Right.
But the word sense, sensual, senses, the five senses is the key here. That the point is that language, all language can do is point at experience, the living experience of go and live. Go and live. Just like I never finished high school because I wanted to go and live. I wanted to feel. So yeah, I guess I'm complaining to a little bit that astrologers in general are all about trying to elevate, trying to get out of the body, trying to get out of the body, when the truth is, unless we can get fully into our body, we have no experience to discuss. People who prefer to live in the intellectual, conceptual world, I'm saying that's all about the sense that it makes, and that all language is pointing to sensuality. That means, and you say it maybe when you say feeling, we need to get into the body, not out of the body. First, we need to get into the body so that we have something to talk about. Otherwise, we don't know what we're talking about. We can just talk about it. And I'm not directing this at you personally. I'm saying astrologers in general are trying to get out of the body as far as they can, above it. And I'm just saying somebody should point out to them, that's not going to help you much, because unless you get in and live, you don't have anything to talk about. That's what we talk about experience, right? We have to have, we look for people who, when I talk to all the Black blues players and to all the Tibetan lamas, I was wanting to get to know, to feel their experience, right?
Right.
They were experienced. They knew what they were talking about, but I didn't know very much about what I was talking about. And certainly if I look at the world of astrology, I'd have to say just what I said, but that mostly you see a whole bunch of people straining to get out of the body without having gotten into the body first. I mean, there's a whole in esoteric astrology, or occult ways of looking at it, esoteric astrology, I guess is a better word. This was called, rounding the nadir, reaching the bottom. You have to reach as far into the visceral part of life before you start to try to get out of it. Otherwise, you're trying to leave the body before the body's ready to release you. And so I'm very much about, and I can hear it in everyone's voice and in everyone's reasoning, just because I can see them trying to leave the body before it's time. That time will come when we leave the body and we leave it completely, but it's not going to come until very late in life, like the end of life. And any attempt to leave it too soon is we're just missing a lot of the reason that we have a body to begin with. I'm sorry, I don't want to preach. I'm just sort of saying.
Oh, that's okay. I think, like I said, I think we're talking about the same thing. We just have different,
right,
maybe perspective or experiences. And that's interesting. You have considerably more Earth than what I do. I have one planet. I have one planet in Earth, and it's in the 12th house, and it's Saturn.
Got a bunch of them.
That's it. But I think the essence, Michael, is the simple fact that we are both consciously aware that there's something, a part of us that is beyond most of our conscious ability to have a satisfying relationship with, and that we're looking for that. And I think what you're trying to say is, rather than trying to escape this world by going to that world, bring that world, the energy and the power of that world into this world, anchor it, to make a better world.
Yeah, I'm sort of saying another way to paraphrase that would be, for many years I did readings to make a living, right? Mm-hmm. Almost 10 years of it. And I still do more than I have time for. The whole idea of doing a reading, as I understand it, is that people often end up for me anyway, because they've given up on psychotherapy or whatever they were doing. It didn't work for them. So they end up going, shooting the moon and trying to go to a crazy astrologer and get some information, right? Mm-hmm. But the point of it all is you cannot change what you refuse to accept. Mm. And unless we've accepted exactly what it is for us, exactly where we're at now, even if it's painful, mm-hmm. we cannot change it. It's like if I had a baseball in my hand and I look at my hand and I see it, gee, I'm frozen in the grip of that baseball, right? I have a death grip on it. I have to let that baseball down, flex my hands, and then gently pick it back up again. That's exactly what happens in a reading. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of crying and stuff like that. People have to let go and accept what they have. So I repeat, you cannot change what you refuse to accept. If you don't accept where you're at, you're not going to be able to do anything at all. So I just think it's just another way of saying what I'm talking about in terms of accepting your incarnation, accepting getting into the body and living in it. It's like driving a car. You can't drive the car unless you get the steering wheel in your hand, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're just out of the body all the time, it may seem kind of transcendental, but transcendental, transcending the dental. My teacher used to say, snap his teeth. My first teacher was a Rosicrucian teacher. Okay. That was an initiator for Rosicrucian traveling one, but he was retired. And I spent the last few years of his life. And when he died, I buried him and made a tombstone for him and all that kind of stuff. So he taught what I'm sharing now. This is basically Saturn issues, Saturn mm-hmm. cycle. If we don't incarnate, we have nothing to sense. We don't fully sense the world and experience it. We don't know what we're talking about. I think that's the way to say. We can talk about it, but we don't know what we're talking about. That idea. So I keep coming back to this. I don't know why, but I do.
Yeah, I think it's kind of symbolically what is meant by having children. That polarity, in that polarity, the opportunity exists for new birth. and without the polarity, the new birth cannot be manifested. Whether that be, a further revelation in truth of who we are, what we are. And then, of course, the trick is balancing that, living in the world, but not being of it, to use kind of a biblical background.
But not being of it, what's that mean? I know the Bible thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sort of, you better be of it some.
Mm-hmm.
Mean,
I think the intent, sometimes I think that things like the Bible were written unconsciously or unintelligently because they weren't able to translate maybe the proper Greek or the Hebrew. For me, it has to do with the fact of being able to function in the world and also to work with your higher nature to be able to create or to manifest the best possible scenario for a life well lived. One in which you're able to not only, help yourself along to exist in the physical world, but also to help people and to touch them profoundly in a way to where they realize more of who and what they are than a lot of the self-torture that people go through, from how they were raised and the turmoil that they've gone through due to lack of understanding.
Yeah, I mean, my first Christian teacher just, used to say over and over again, I mean, when I was with him, I'm a big talker. When I was with him, I never talked. And this would go on. Some days I was so exhausted from being with him all day long, I could barely get home and collapse because he was pouring stuff. And he even said, I'm pouring something into you that years from now, you will respond to. And it's absolutely true. So I just, I can't say enough how important it is I don't know how to say it without accenting the self again. I guess I just don't know how to say it right now. I'm just sort of saying we shouldn't let the opportunity of a lifetime pass. And the Buddhists say the same thing. They say that one of the four thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma is called the preciousness of this human life. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, I guess I'm saying is that don't forget to live it. Don't forget to incarnate. And don't be so, as what I said before, so in a hurry to leave it, that we want to push ourselves out of the body because it seems more transcendental to us, when really it's just ignorance on our part of the opportunity. What is it that Shakespeare said? Shakespeare, I think, is the greatest writer in the English language for me. And I haven't read them all because I got the idea of it. But he says, you are no, something like, you are no more yourself than you now here live. Mm-hmm. We're just only as much as we care to actually live. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about getting our hands in the clay of ourselves, getting incarnate, not being afraid of being incarnate, not being afraid of the senses, but plunging ourselves in the senses so that we will feel of life. And I sound like a preacher, and maybe I'm a modern kind of preacher, but something like that.
That's what you feel. That's what you feel. That's what you feel authentically within inside of yourself. And if you're a true person, you're going to say what you feel. Okay?
Well, exactly.
Because you feel that self-empowerment. Now, we've been doing this for almost an hour, Michael, and I'm just wondering, do you want to stop right here? And then
I don't need to, if you don't need to. I mean, you can always chop this up however you want. As long as you have any questions, I can talk for a while. At some point I need to stop, but I'm a big talker, as I just said.
I just think that there is probably a lot that you and I could communicate and talk about. And I've got some other things that I need to do, but I wanted to ask, how you felt about our interview, and if you would like to continue and do more of this, because I've still got questions on Buddhism. I have questions on experiences, LSD and otherwise.
All right.
Your writing, okay, and then also the Heart Center and where that came in, and it may be even as important as everything, your relationship with Margaret and what that has taught you about yourself, your life, your growth.
Of course.
How you've seen that relationship teach you, how she has been your teacher and helped you to recognize maybe the flaws in your character or your being and the growth you had to go through in that relationship, if you're open to that.
Oh yeah, I mean, we've been married for 50 years. Got, 4 kids and 8 grandkids. So I know all about that kind of stuff because
okay,
we're doing a lot of babysitting.
Okay, like I said, I feel good about this. I feel good about the energy. I feel good about the discussion. Cool. I feel that it's valuable information for other people, and that they'll get a different understanding of astrology.
So you'll give me a copy of what we've done here.
I'll give you a copy for this, and then we'll set something up. I'll do an electional chart and stuff because it seemed to work pretty good for us today.
And when are you going to publish what you do? I mean, I'm free to do what I want with what you send me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just may chop it up and put it up. And when you publish yours, let me know. I'll put it on my site. I reach a fair number of people.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Like I said, I won't do a whole lot of editing to it. I'll dress it up.
Do whatever you want.
Okay. I'll dress it up and let the content and the energy, touch whoever it touches.
Good. So I'm available whenever you want to do another one. Just let me know. And
okay.
Okay, we good?
That sounds good to me. Like I said, I'll do a chart. Maybe we'll schedule it off of that.
All right. So we'll say peace. See you soon. All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.